Chapter 1. The Wager of Stars. The grand palaces of Thera drifted like a jeweled crown above the twin suns. Its translucent domes shimmered with prismatic light, each spire casting beams into the void, as if the empire itself were trying to rival the stars. Inside the Hall of Concord, laughter echoed against walls grown from living crystal. Courtiers in flowing robes of bioluminescent silk lounged on gravity-cushioned platforms, their voices sharp and sweet like glass striking glass. Princess Seralyth stood at the center of it all, a figure both adored and feared. Her gown was spun from threads of starlight, shifting in hue with each gesture, her silver hair flowing like liquid across her shoulders. She raised her chalice, an intricate cup carved from the bones of Sky Leviathan, and her lips curved into a dangerous smile. "They tell me," she began, her voice carried with natural command, "that the newest species permitted into our star lanes believes itself our equal." The court erupted into amused murmurs. Some laughed behind jeweled masks. Others hissed softly through their multiple throats. "Yes, yes," Seralyth continued, basking in their attention. "The humans, they stumble from their cradle and already speak of treaties, alliances, dignity. They believe their charm can sway us, as if we were naive maidens at a frontier market." A noble woman with skin patterned in living constellations leaned forward. "Do you mean to say one of them has dared approach you, Highness?" Seralyth's smile sharpened. "Not yet, but I will make it so. Let it be known tonight, before all gathered here, that no human's crude manner, no human's primitive heart, could ever touch the bloodlines of Thera. If one dares try, I will resist and win." The hall roared with approval. Crystal goblets clinked, wings fluttered, and the faint resonance of alien laughter thrummed like a chorus. Yet not all joined in. Near the rear of the chamber, standing without ornament or retinue, was a lone human. He wore no glowing silks, no woven gemstones. Just a dark navy uniform of matte fabric, its lines sharp and simple, a single emblem, Earth's rising star crest, etched over his chest. Captain Marcus Hale's jaw was set, his eyes calm. The hum of the palace's artificial gravity generators seemed louder around him, as if the environment itself strained to reject his presence. Still, he did not lower his gaze. A merchant lord with too many eyes gestured toward him with mocking delight. "There, one already hides among us. A human envoy. Perhaps he will take up your challenge, Princess." Every alien gaze swiveled toward Marcus. Even the crystalline pillars seemed to glow brighter, as if spotlighting him. Seralyth tilted her head, studying him as one might study an insect pinned beneath glass. "You, human, do you hear the wager of your betters?" Marcus stepped forward. His boots clicked softly on the crystalline floor, each sound stark against the susurrus of alien voices. He bowed, but only slightly, just enough to acknowledge her title, not enough to grovel. "I hear," he said, his voice steady. "And I wonder if you've already lost, Princess." Gasps rippled across the court. A servant dropped his platter. The sound of shattering glass punctuated the silence. Seralyth's smile didn't falter, but her fingers tightened around the stem of her chalice. Bold words. "Explain yourself." Marcus's gaze swept the hall. The alien nobles with their jewel-encrusted skin, their elongated limbs, their haughty amusement. He let the silence stretch before answering. "Because a wager isn't about resisting something you don't fear. It's about denying something you secretly want." The court hissed with scandal. Some demanded his removal. Others laughed nervously. The princess's eyes, however, narrowed not in rage, but in a glint of something far more dangerous. Interest. Marcus did not wait for permission to continue. "Humans don't measure strength in crowns or bloodlines. We measure it in what we endure. You wager against charm? Princess charm is the weakest weapon we have. What will you do when we offer something stronger? For a moment, the hall seemed to tilt. The bioluminescent silks of the nobles dimmed, their chatter dulled. Even the eternal hum of the engines that held the palace aloft faded beneath the weight of his words. Seralyth broke the silence with a laugh, rich and cold as starlight. Very well, human. Let us see what you can offer. I accept the game. The court exploded with sound again, wagers and whispers filling the chamber. But Seralyth held Marcus's gaze a heartbeat longer than she intended, and when she finally turned away, she realized her pulse had quickened in a way she could not name. High above, beyond the glass dome, the twin suns burned in their eternal dance, and beneath their light, the wager stars had begun. Chapter 2, A Human Among Empires. The orbital palace hung like a drifting cathedral above the gas giant, its lattices of crystal and gold catching the light of distant stars. From the observation walkways, the galaxy itself looked like a painting in motion. Nebulae bleeding violet across the void, fleets of merchant ships threading silver contrails as they departed docking arms. To Marcus Hale it was breathtaking, yet hostile. Every corridor he walked reminded him he was an intruder. The walls pulsed faintly, alive with biotech conduits. Air tasted of ozone and floral spices he couldn't name. Guards in chitinous armor eyed him with slit-pupiled disdain. Courtiers whispered as he passed, their tones dripping with amusement, as though a savage beast had been let loose in a sanctuary. Marcus kept his stride even. He had walked through burning ships, through battlefields where air recyclers coughed blood-scented fog. A little mockery in a gilded hallway would not shake him. Two attendants led him into the throne atrium, a cavernous chamber where gravity flowed strangely. One step fell heavy, the next feather-light. Alien nobles floated effortlessly across hovering disks, their garments shimmering like galaxies contained in fabric. The hum of the gravitic core beneath the floor gave the room a low, constant pulse, like the heartbeat of a slumbering giant. At the far end, upon a throne sculpted from an asteroid veined with luminous crystal, Princess Seralyth reclined. She had changed attire. Her gown now shimmered with shifting constellations, each star point a diamond of living light. Her gaze was cool, but Marcus felt its weight like a blade pressed to his neck. Captain Marcus Hale, the herald announced in a voice amplified by resonant harmonics. Representative of Terra. Some nobles hissed. Others chuckled. One with feathered crest muttered audibly, "Does he come bearing stone tools?" Marcus ignored them. He stepped forward, boots striking the crystalline floor in defiance of their floating grace. He bowed only slightly, just as he had before. "Your Highness, on behalf of the United Earth Directorate, I thank you for granting me this audience." Seralyth tilted her head, studying him as if he were a peculiar specimen in her menagerie. "You thank me," she said slowly, "but you do not kneel." "I kneel to no one but my people," Marcus replied evenly. "And they sent me to speak as an equal, not a supplicant." The chamber rippled with scandalized laughter. One noble sputtered, their bioluminescent veins flashing red in outrage. Another's wings flared wide, casting sparks into the air. Seralyth raised her hand, and silence fell like a curtain. "You humans cling to pride as though it were armor, yet pride without power is but vanity." "Perhaps," Marcus said, voice steady, "but humans are stubborn. Vanity breaks. Stubbornness endures." The words hung in the atrium like an unexpected chord, resonating deeper than they should have. For the first time, a flicker of curiosity crossed Seralyth's expression. She leaned forward, the constellation gown shifting like a living sky. "Tell me, human," she asked softly, "what do you see when you stand among us? An empire older than your species' first fire? Do you see inferiors, or do you understand the gulf between us?" Marcus let his eyes roam the hall. The levitating nobles in robes worth more than starships, the shimmering walls that breathe with alien biotech. The crystal throne glowed with the pulse of a captured asteroid. All of it was dazzling. All of it was foreign. And yet, he smiled. I see a gulf, he admitted. But I also see that gulfs can be crossed. Once, humanity stood barefoot on stone, staring up at the night sky. We crossed oceans. We crossed worlds. And now we stand here. The nobles muttered among themselves. Some scoffed, but others quieted, unsettled by the steel in his voice. Seralyth's lips curved, not into a smile, but into something sharper, an expression caught between challenge and intrigue. You speak well for one whose tongue has known civilization for so short a time. Perhaps, she said, her voice low enough that only he could hear. This wager will not be so simple. Their eyes locked, hers glimmering with alien fire, his steady with human defiance. Around them, the hall resumed its hum of whispers. But for that moment, the galaxy narrowed to a line drawn between two wills. The princess had won a game. Marcus, without bowing, had already changed the rules. Chapter 3. Sparks at the Banquet. The banquet hall of Zethera's orbital palace was a cathedral of light and decadence. Hundreds of crystalline chandeliers floated midair, casting rainbow prisms across vaulted ceilings. The long tables shimmered with living cloth that pulsed faintly, a heartbeat echoing through the hall. Alien delicacies, dishes grown in zero-gravity gardens, meats cultivated from creatures of liquid methane seas, glowed faintly in their translucent serving bowls. The air smelled of spice, ozone, and something floral that made Marcus's head swim. Princess Seralyth presided at the head of the feast, her silhouette a constellation of jeweled fire against a backdrop of the galaxy beyond. The twin suns of the system glared through panoramic windows, their light refracting across her gown until she looked like a queen of nebulae. Around her, the nobility whispered and snickered, their eyes often cutting toward the lone human seated at her left. Marcus ate cautiously, pushing aside dishes that smoked with volatile fumes. One platter writhed faintly as though the food were still alive. He kept his composure, but his eyes flicked towards Seralyth when she delicately lifted a morsel of glowing fruit to her lips, her expression betraying amusement at his hesitation. "Is the feast not to your liking, Captain?" she asked, her voice carrying easily across the hall. Nobles leaned in, eager to hear him humiliate himself. Marcus picked up a glass filled with iridescent liquid that shifted colors when stirred. He swirled it, then set it down without drinking. "It's beautiful," he admitted, "but some of it smells like engine coolant. Forgive me if I'd rather keep my stomach intact." A ripple of laughter moved through the hall, half mocking, half startled. Seralyth's eyes glinted, her lips curving. "Engine coolant? That is the nectar of the sky orchids of Mwr. Entire wars have been fought to harvest a single bloom." "Then humanity must be strange indeed," Marcus said calmly. "We fight wars over water and bread." Silence. A few nobles frowned, as if offended by the comparison, but Seralyth tilted her head, intrigued. "You reduce grandeur to simplicity," she murmured. "Perhaps that is your species' charm." Marcus allowed a faint smile. "Or perhaps it's survival. Simplicity keeps us alive when grandeur burns away." Their words hovered between them like charged plasma, sparking under the weight of watching eyes. Nobles leaned closer, hungry for scandal, yet unsure whether the princess mocked or was being drawn into something more dangerous. Later in the meal, music drifted to the hall. Alien instruments with tones like liquid bells, harmonics that vibrated deep in the bones. Courtiers rose to dance in patterns of slow, swirling elegance, their movements more ritual than pleasure. Seralyth rose as well, the living stars of her gown flowing in liquid constellations. She turned, not to one of her suitors, but to Marcus. "Do humans dance?" she asked, amusement lacing her tone. "Not like this," Marcus said, watching the graceful, floating motions of bodies gliding above the floor. "But we find our rhythm where we can." A collective gasp filled the chamber as Seralyth extended her hand to him. It was a challenge as much as an invitation. Marcus stood, aware of every eye on him. His hand was rougher than hers, his grip firmer, his movements less fluid as he stepped onto the dance floor. The nobles circled, whispering eagerly, expecting him to stumble, to embarrass himself. Instead, Marcus guided her, not with her style, but with human steadiness, a soldier's confidence. The dance became something new. She moved with alien grace, he with grounded precision, their steps clashing yet weaving together. Sparks of bioluminescence trailed their feet as they crossed the floor, his boots heavy, her robe swirling like starlight. By the end, the whispers had fallen silent. Only the music lingered, haunting and strange. Seralyth's lips curved as they stopped, closer than courtly distance allowed. "You stumble, yet you do not fall," she said softly, her eyes searching his face. "Story of my people," Marcus murmured back. For the first time, the princess felt a pang she could not define. Curiosity, irritation, fascination, all tangled into something far more dangerous. She had made a wager before the court, but with each passing moment, she began to realize the game was already shifting, and she could not tell if she was still in control. Chapter 4. Shadows in the Palace. The orbital palace was never truly silent. Its walls hummed faintly with the pulse of energy conduits. Its corridors shimmered with reflected starlight from beyond. Yet that night, as Marcus walked alone through the training wing, the silence pressed heavier than usual. He had been invited, or perhaps lured, by an anonymous note delivered on a folded hollow slip. "If you would prove humanity's worth, come to the Hall of Blades. Midnight. Alone." The princess's seal had been falsified, but well enough to raise suspicion. Marcus trusted neither the message nor the palace, but ignoring it might have been worse. The Hall of Blades stretched before him like an arena trapped in twilight. The chamber's floor was a vast disk of obsidian alloy, suspended in low gravity. Above, racks of weaponry gleamed under hovering orbs of light. Alien blades, plasma glaives, whips woven from quantum filaments, each a relic of cultures older than Earth's first cities. Marcus stepped onto the floor. His boots barely touched before he drifted upward, weightless, and he adjusted his stance, fighting against the disorienting pull of false gravity. He had trained in zero-G before, but here the environment was alive, subtly shifting. The shadows moved. 6 figures emerged, clad in segmented armor that shimmered like oil on water. Nobles assassins, mercenaries loyal to Seralyth's rivals. Their helmets were faceless, their weapons glowing faintly. One carried a whip of crackling plasma, another a long staff tipped with vibrating blades. "You've lingered too long in her presence, human," one hissed, their voice distorted through a mask. "The court will not tolerate it. Tonight you vanish." Marcus exhaled slowly. "Funny," he said, raising his fists. "That's what they told me in half a dozen battlefields back home. Never worked then. Won't work now." The assassins launched at him, their movement swift and predatory. Plasma arced through the air, carving streaks of blue fire. The low gravity turned every strike into a glide, every motion into a deadly ballet. Marcus ducked, twisted, caught the edge of a floating blade rack. His boots clanged against the support strut, momentum carrying him in a spin. He snatched a weapon from the rack as he whirled past. A curved alien sword, its edge shimmering with energy. The hilt vibrated violently in his grip, rejecting his touch, but he forced his hand steady. An assassin swung the plasma whip. Marcus kicked off a wall, narrowly dodging as a whip scorched the air where his chest had been. The heat licked across his skin. He came in hard, driving the alien blade into the assassin's arm. Sparks scattered, the mercenary howled, and their weapon floated away in 0G. Another thrust at him with the twin-bladed staff. Marcus caught it on instinct, twisting with brute force. The assassin expected finesse, not raw human strength. Bones cracked under the pressure. The staff tumbled free. Marcus drove his elbow into the assassin's helmet, sending the figure tumbling, spinning helplessly into the void of the chamber. But for every one he struck down, another circled closer. Sweat beaded on his brow, floating as tiny droplets in the low gravity. His breath thundered in his ears, mingling with the chamber's constant hum. His arms ached, but his eyes burned with defiance. Then a new sound cut through the chaos, a voice sharp and furious. Enough! The assassins froze. Across the chamber, Princess Seralyth stood at the entrance, her gown replaced by a dark combat mantle that clung to her form like liquid armor. Her eyes blazed with cold fury, brighter than the twin suns themselves. The mercenaries faltered, bowing their heads. "Highness, he is a danger to your honor. You dare stain my halls with cowardice?" she spat. Her voice cracked like thunder. 6 against 1? Against a guest under my roof? You shame yourselves in my empire. They stammered, but she raised her hand. The air shimmered, and with a gesture, the palace's automated sentries came alive, dozens of crystalline drones rising from the walls, their weapons humming. The assassins fled, vanishing into the corridors like shattered shadows. Marcus floated there, chest heaving, gripping the alien blade still trembling in his hand. He looked at Seralyth, sweat glistening on his brow, lips pulling into a grim smile. "Guess your wager's still intact," he said. She stepped toward him, eyes narrowing as she studied his bruised arms, the blood trickling from a shallow cut across his jaw. For the first time, her composure faltered, not with mockery, but with something perilously close to awe. "You should be dead," she whispered. "Story of my life," Marcus muttered. He let the alien blade drift from his fingers, watching it spin into the void of the chamber. Seralyth's heart beat faster than she wished to admit. Against her will, she found herself imagining the ripple his words would make through the court when they learned of this night, and what ripple he had already made within her. The human endured, and in enduring, he had unsettled everything. Chapter 5. Chains of Choice. The princess's private chambers were carved into the palace's upper spire, a sanctuary of glass and starlight suspended above the void. From the balcony, Marcus could see the twin suns bleeding their light across the nebula horizon, painting the galaxy in gold and violet. The room itself glowed faintly with bioluminescent vines curling along the walls, their fragrance sharp and sweet, almost intoxicating. Marcus stood near the viewport, his reflection caught against the endless stars. His knuckles were raw from the fight, his uniform scorched and torn. He had refused medical attendance, trusting their hands too little, and cleaned his wounds with a rag himself. The faint hum of the palace's gravitic core vibrated through the floor, steady as a drumbeat. Behind him, the chamber doors whispered open. Seralyth entered, her gown of combat armor replaced once more by regal fabric, but was simpler than before, muted in color, as though she sought not to impress her court but to mask her thoughts. Her hair shimmered in pale silver cascades, yet her expression was unreadable. "You should not be alive," she said quietly, her voice carrying like the edge of a blade across still water. Marcus turned, eyes steady. "Funny, that's what they keep telling me." She frowned at his tone. Her people bowed, flattered, groveled. None dared to meet her gaze so evenly. Yet this human did, and it unsettled her more than the assassination attempt itself. "You think yourself invincible," she said, pacing closer, the stars tracing across her gown as she moved. "But you survived by chance, by recklessness. You are flesh, Weak, fragile. I could end you with a gesture. He let the silence stretch, then shrugged slightly. Then why don't you? Her breath caught. She hadn't expected the challenge. He wasn't afraid. He was daring her, as though testing the limits of her own pride. Seralyth's eyes narrowed, voice trembling with something between anger and intrigue. You presume too much, human. Do you imagine this is the game? That your survival grants you power over me? Marcus took a slow step closer, his boots ringing faintly against the crystalline floor. He didn't reach for her, didn't bow. He only met her eyes. No, I imagine nothing. But I know survival changes the board. Your rivals tried to kill me. They failed. That makes me more than an amusement. Her lips parted, but no words came. She hated the truth of it. He was more. His endurance, his refusal to yield, even when bloodied and cornered, shook her certainty. She turned sharply away, pacing toward the balcony. The glow of the suns painted her silhouette in fire. Her hands gripped the railing until her knuckles whitened. You are dangerous, she whispered. Not because of your strength, but because you plant doubt where there should be none. I made a wager to prove your kind's charm powerless. Yet now, her voice faltered, now I question my own defenses. Marcus moved to stand beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost brushed, yet not touching. The suns reflected in his eyes, steady and unwavering. I didn't come here to charm you, he said softly. I came to speak for my people, to prove we belong here among the stars. If that threatens you, maybe it's because deep down you already know we do. Chapter 6. Collapse of the Crown. The alarms began as a low vibration in the walls, like a distant storm rolling through the palace. Then came the shrieking wail of klaxons, red light spilling across the crystalline halls, transforming their elegance into jagged shadows. The orbital palace, usually serene, suddenly throbbed with chaos. Marcus was the first to move. He had lived with alarms since his youth. Starships failing, battlefields burning. Instinct told him what the nobles had not yet admitted. This was no drill. He sprinted from Seralyth's chambers, scanning the corridors' twisting veins of bioluminescent vines. Guards ran past in disarray, some shouting orders, others carrying data crystals. Nobles shrieked and shoved one another, their silken robes tangling as they scrambled for escape pods. Seralyth followed, her gown flowing behind her like molten silver. What is happening? She demanded of a guard. The soldier's eyes burned with shame as he bowed low. Forgive me, Highness. The council has declared you guilty of conspiracy against the throne. They've seized the core. They mean to exile you, strip your bloodline of its claim. Her face went pale. Conspiracy? That is madness. Who dares? But she stopped herself. She already knew. Rival houses, jealous of her influence, enraged by her growing fascination with the human envoy. Marcus caught the flicker of realization in her eyes. This isn't just politics, he said grimly. It's a coup. A thunderous explosion shook the floor beneath them, scattering shards of crystal from the ceiling. Smoke curled through the air, acrid and metallic. The hum of the gravitic core faltered, leaving them weightless for a heartbeat before stabilizing. Seralyth stumbled, catching herself against the wall. Her eyes, usually hard and commanding, looked suddenly lost. They mean to erase me, she whispered, to make me nothing. Marcus grasped her arm, pulling her upright. Then we don't give them the chance. The corridor ahead erupted as mercenaries in dark armor spilled from the shadows, weapons glowing with crackling energy. Their visors glared like burning coals. Seize the traitor, one bellowed. Seralyth froze, but Marcus shoved her behind him. Stay down. He charged, seizing a fallen guard weapon, a staff tipped with searing plasma. His first swing cracked into the chest of an advancing mercenary, hurling them into a wall. Another lunge of blade of light. But Marcus caught their wrist, twisted, and drove an elbow into their mask. Bone and metal crunched together. Energy bolts sizzled across the hall. Marcus pulled Seralyth into cover, shielding her with his body as shards of molten crystal sprayed. She gasped, her hand clutching his sleeve. "Why?" she whispered hoarsely. "You could escape. Save yourself. Why stay?" He looked at her, sweat streaking his dirt-smeared face, his eyes fierce. "Because I don't abandon people. Not on Earth. Not here. Not ever." Her chest tightened painfully. His words were simple, stripped of the honeyed rhetoric of her court, but they burned truer than anything she had heard in her gilded life. More mercenaries advanced, but Marcus fought with relentless fury. Not graceful, not elegant, just human grit. Every strike born of stubbornness, every dodge a refusal to die. Blood ran from a gash on his forehead, but he pressed on, dragging Seralyth with him through collapsing corridors lit by fire and betrayal. At last they burst into the hangar, the vast bay filled with chaos. Starships burned, fuel tanks ruptured, smoke filling the air. Nobles scrambled aboard sleek personal yachts, while guards clashed with mercenaries. The roar of engines, the shriek of alarms, the crackle of plasma fire. It was a storm of survival. Marcus spotted a freighter, its hull scorched but engines intact. He tightened his grip on Seralyth's hand. "That one. Move." She stumbled beside him, every step tearing at her pride. Hours ago she had been royalty, adored and untouchable. Now she was dragged through smoke like a fugitive, surviving only because a human refused to let her fall. They boarded the freighter as plasma fire rained across the bay. Marcus slammed the hatch shut and threw himself into the pilot's chair, hands moving with the steady focus of a soldier who had stolen ships before. The engines roared to life. Outside, the palace burned, its once glittering dome shattering into the void. The freighter tore free, plunging into the stars. Seralyth collapsed into the co-pilot's chair, trembling, her chest heaving with ragged breaths. Her empire had turned its back, her title ripped away, her crown shattered. She had lost everything, except the man beside her, bloodied, battered, but unbroken. Hands steady on the controls, as if carrying her fate was no heavier than carrying his own. For the first time in her life, Seralyth felt truly powerless. And for the first time, she understood why that might not be a curse. Chapter 7, The Last Refuge. The freighter drifted in the shadow of a crimson nebula, its hull scorched, engines running quiet. No insignia marked its frame. It was the kind of vessel smugglers use to vanish between the cracks of empires. Inside, the air smelled of oil, singed circuitry, and faint recycled metal tang. It was a far cry from the perfumed crystal halls of Zathera's palace. Seralyth sat slumped in the co-pilot's chair, staring at her reflection in the viewport. Her gown, once living light in starlight silk, was torn, ash-stained, and clinging to her frame. Her hair, once flowing like silver rivers, was tangled and dull. She hardly recognized the hollow-eyed figure staring back. Behind her, Marcus worked at the navigation console, fingers steady as he adjusted the course to the nebula's thick ion clouds. The hum of the ship's battered engines filled the silence like a heartbeat, steady and grounding. At last, Seralyth spoke, her voice brittle. "It is gone. Everything. My title, my court, the legacy of my bloodline. Stripped away in a single night." Marcus glanced at her, but said nothing at first. He continued keying commands, the navigation screen glowing blue across his scarred features. Only after a long pause did he answer. "Then maybe you got the chance to find out who you are without all of it." Her head snapped toward him, silver eyes flashing. "Without it, I am nothing. You do not understand what it means to lose a crown. Without rank, I am no one. Marcus leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. Back on Earth, crowns were just metal circles. Some wore them, most didn't. Didn't make them more human than the rest of us. Seralyth's lips trembled with anger, and something else. You mock what you cannot grasp. My people are bound by legacy. Bloodline is everything. Then maybe that's a problem, Marcus said quietly. The silence that followed was heavier than before. Seralyth turned back to the viewport, her throat tightening. The nebula swirled beyond, colors shifting like fire and smoke, vast and indifferent. For the first time, she felt the full weight of her exile. She was a princess with no throne, a queen with no subjects. Her hands clenched into fists. Do you think this amuses me? That you can throw words like stones and break what I am? No, Marcus said. His tone was calm, not mocking, not cruel. Just steady, infuriatingly steady. I think you've never had to stand without someone holding you up, and now you're standing alone. That's not weakness, Seralyth. That's freedom. The way he said her name, without title, without ceremony, cut sharper than any blade. She should have struck him for it, should have reminded him of the gulf between them. Yet her chest ached instead, an ache she could neither name nor silence. Her voice wavered. And what if I cannot stand? Marcus met her gaze, his eyes weary but unyielding. Then I'll be here until you do. That's how humans survive. We don't leave each other behind. Her breath caught. She turned away quickly, hiding the sting in her eyes, the trembling in her lips. For a long while, only the hum of the ship filled the air, steady and constant. The nebula cleared, revealing a cluster of scattered asteroids. Marcus guided the freighter into the shadow of one, shutting down non-essential systems. The stars glittered beyond, infinite and cold. Here, at last, they were hidden, alone in the void. Seralyth pressed her palms to the viewport, watching the cosmos stretch endlessly. She had lost everything, her crown, her empire, her people. Yet as Marcus leaned back, exhaustion finally settling into his frame, she realized something strange. For the first time in her life, she was not being watched as royalty, as untouchable divinity. He saw her not as a princess, not as a ruler, but simply as Seralyth, and it terrified her more than exile ever could. Chapter 8, A Crown Reforged. They came back to Zathera in a patchwork flotilla that should not have inspired fear. Freighters with scorched hulls, tugboats stitched with salvage, a handful of Royal Guard corvettes whose insignia had been hastily painted over. Yet as they rose from the shadow of the Crimson Nebula, running dark until the last second, the calm lanes filled with astonished voices. Inside the freighter, the air was cold and clean, scrubbers working overtime. Marcus checked the jury-rigged transponder one last time, a tangle of cables and a repurposed coolant manifold ticking softly beneath his hands. The engine's low hum vibrated through the deck like a calm heartbeat. Across from him, Seralyth tightened the straps of the pilot's harness over a simple flight jacket. No jewels, no drifting constellation silk. She had cut her hair blunt at the shoulder with a maintenance knife, the silver strands now practical instead of ceremonial. The diadem lay on the console between them, a thin ring of white metal and living light, its glow subdued in the utilitarian cockpit. "You're certain about the broadcast?" Marcus asked, thumb hovering over the manual trigger. "Once we speak, there's no going back." Seralyth glanced at the diadem, then past it, out the viewport to the familiar curve of the orbital palace, scarred, not fallen, glittering above the gas giant like a memory she refused to let define her. "No more masks," she said. Her voice was soft and steady. "No more rules written to guard our fear." He flipped the safety cover. "Then say it." The wideband carried her voice across the system, riding the static of ion storms and the thrumming networks of merchant relays. It went out to every dock worker who had watched the noble ship pass them, to every junior officer who had seen a guilty decree signed with a bored flourish, to every citizen who had never once expected to be asked what they wanted. "I am Seralyth of Thera," she said. "I was declared traitor by those who fear change. Hear me before you decide who I am." Silence on the channel, like a held breath. Then the faint click of countless receivers turning up their volume. I was raised to believe blood binds a future. It doesn't. What binds a future is choice. I lost my crown because I let pride choose for me. Today I choose something else. She paused, watching the palace swell in the viewport. I choose to serve. On a private channel, Marcus exhaled. Good. A cluster of corvettes slid from the palace's shadow, weapons charging. Marcus kept the freighter steady, the manual throttle warm under his palm. In the bay behind them, 3 minor captains strapped into cracked chairs, their hands calloused and ready. The loyalist guards, those who had slipped away with shame in their eyes after the coup, sat helmetless, waiting to see if words could be armor. The first warning shot bloomed, like a blue flower ahead of their bow. "Hold," Seralyth said. She leaned toward the calm Captain Vilrin. "You know my voice. My blood is nothing. Judge me by the one who stands with me, the human who refused to leave while your nobles burned our hangars." Minutes stretched. Marcus felt the freighter's tired frame groan. He could taste ozone where a microfracture bled the scent of space into the cabin. Then the corvette's lights blinked, half their batteries dimming. A reply came, taut with disbelief. "Highness, we were told." "You were told to fear," she said. "I ask you to choose." The corvettes moved aside. Marcus let out a breath he hadn't admitted he was holding. "That buys us a hallway," he said. "Not the room." "It's all we've ever needed," Seralyth replied. Docking happened fast, because boldness forgives rough edges. The freighter kissed the palace's mid-level service port. Maglocks clamped with a hollow thud. They moved through maintenance corridors that smelled of coolant and polish, walls pulsing as if the palace were breathing faster. Drones tracked their heat signatures and then, at a silent code from within the guard ranks, drifted back into alcoves. The loyalists peeled away in pairs to secure junctions. Miners, laughing a little too loudly to hide their terror, carried power cutters like ceremonial staves. At the door of the council rotunda, Seralyth touched the diadem once, then set it on the floor and stepped over it. Inside, the chamber blazed with white light. Counselors, draped in authority like armor, whirled to face them, mouths tightening, fingers twitching toward hidden controls. Marcus felt gravity shift, someone trying to unbalance the intruders, and planted his boots, his stance low and stubborn. He didn't draw a weapon. He met their eyes. Seralyth did not bow. She didn't climb the dais, either. She took the center of the floor where supplicants usually knelt and turned so the dome's transparent apex framed the planet's bands behind her. The hum of the gravitic coils sank into her bones. "And this nonsense," a counselor snapped. "You are deposed. You return with pirates and a pet savage." "Guards." No one moved. Seralyth raised her palm, not to command, but to open. You can cling to law that protects itself, or you can forge law that protects your people. Choose. I will not wear a crown to make you listen. I will rebuild our oath without it. The counselors faltered beneath a silence that grew teeth. Through the glass above, 1,000 work lights winked on across the palace hall as dock crews paused to watch. In the galleries, officers shifted uncomfortably and then stood straighter, as if a weight had been redistributed. It was Marcus who broke the stalemate, his voice plain as unvarnished steel. "On Earth, we learned the hard way that titles don't hold when ships are burning. Only hands do. You want to know what humans bring? This we stay. We fix what breaks. We carry each other. A counselor sneered. And what will you carry, human, when the crown refuses you? Seralyth answered for him. I will carry it. She bent, lifted the diadem with 2 fingers, and pressed it to the floor. The living metal softened under her touch, folding like light into a thinner band. She looked up, eyes bright, not as a circlet above the people, as a promise among them. She set the smaller ring on the edge of the dais. Judge me by how I serve. Long seconds. Then Captain Vilrin strode in, helm tucked on his arm, and dropped to one knee. Not the old obeisance, but the posture of a soldier swearing to stand, not to kneel. Others followed. A mechanic with grease on her cheek, a young council aide blinking away tears, a miner whose hands shook until he clenched them still. The coup unraveled, not with a blade, but with a choice multiplied. Hours later, the palace was quiet again. The damage would take months to mend, the laws years. In a dim maintenance bay, Seralyth and Marcus stood at a viewport where the first dawn spread across the gas giant like a slow-turning ember. She held the refashioned band in her palm, its glow gentle, human warm. You changed everything, she said. He shook his head. You did. I just refused to leave. She turned the band once, then slid it onto her wrist. Not a crown. A vow. Stay, she murmured, not as a command, not as an order from a throne, but as a request laid bare. Marcus's answer was simple, stubborn, and sufficient. I'm here. Beyond the glass, alien constellations burned. Not ruler and subject, not savior and saved. 2 people, equal in the quiet after the storm, choosing the same horizon. The starship glided in silence, its engines a steady hum that throbbed to the deck like a heartbeat. Beyond the viewport stretched an ocean of stars, alien constellations glimmering against the velvet dark, each one a reminder how small and stubborn humanity was against infinity. Below, the neon-lit sprawls of Thera's capital world pulsed with new life, its towers alive with voices both human and alien, woven together in a future neither had imagined when the wager was first spoken. Seralyth stood at the glass, no longer draped in jeweled arrogance, but in a simple cloak that fluttered with the ship's air currents. At her wrist gleamed the reforged band, no crown but a vow. Marcus joined her, his reflection rugged in the starlight, his presence steady as gravity itself. For a long moment, neither spoke. The engines whispered, the city glowed, the stars burned eternal. Then Seralyth turned, her eyes soft where once they had been steel. I bet I could resist you, she said quietly, almost to herself. And I lost everything. Marcus's hand found hers, callous fingers warm against her skin. He smiled faintly. Or maybe you want everything that matters. Her breath caught, a tear glinting silver in the alien starlight. Together, they watched the horizon as the ship drifted toward the dawn of a shared world. And in that silence, the galaxy seemed to whisper the truth. Humans did not conquer empires with crowns or bloodlines. They endured, they chose, and in choosing, they changed the stars themselves.